I have seen hundreds of horror movies, spent thousands of dollars on those horror movies in my life, and I can't help but feel that I still get the best value out of the free streaming service, Tubi. While services like Netflix, Hulu, and Prime Video keep upping their prices, Tubi is just sitting over here like, psst, we got the goods. Yes, the caveat for it being free is that there are ads, but even Netflix and Prime Video have ads now, even on their paid tiers. What a scam. Every time I open the Tubi app, I'm always baffled by how good the horror selection is and the fact that you don't even need to sign in to watch. But there are a lot of movies on there, so I'm going to help you prevent hours of doom scrolling by giving you 13 amazing horror movies that you can watch for free right now. Make sure to like the video and subscribe if you like talking about horror all year long. House LLC. I'm a bit biased here since my favorite subgenre of horror is found footage, but even within that subgenre, it felt like Hell House was a breath of fresh air, and you can watch it for free now on Tubi.
Oh, are there any modern horror movies that are actually scary?
I get this question all the time, and this movie always jumps to the front of my mind when it happens. In House LLC, a group of friends who run a traveling haunted house company decide to set up their next attraction in an abandoned hotel in Abaddon, New York. The crew thinks it's the perfect place for their haunted house because of the dark secrets the hotel holds, but once they get set up, the true terror of the hotel is shown. 5 years after the deadly opening night of House LLC, a documentary crew is now investigating the haunted house where it all took place. All they've had to go on for the past 5 years is a YouTube video from one of the customers and the 911 phone call of that night. But now all of the tapes documenting the days leading up to the opening night have been discovered. And we get to witness the intriguing, chilling build out of House LLC and discover what happened that fateful night. This movie genuinely just gives me the creeps, and I can't stop watching it either. The acting is top-notch, and in the past decade, this movie has carved out a legacy in the horror genre, spawning 3 sequels that are all worth checking out. Now, you'll probably see that Tubi original logo on Lowlifes and want to give it a hard no, but I highly suggest you reconsider. In Lowlifes, there's a family of 4 who are going on a little road trip in their RV when it unexpectedly shuts down out in the middle of nowhere. And this forces them to stay the night at a rural family's home. This is one of those where it's hard to talk about without spoiling a lot, but the movie takes a lot of twists and turns, doesn't take itself too seriously, and knows how to have fun. The performances are stellar, the writing is witty and clever, and Lowlifes just truly transcends its label as a Tubi original. It's not really like scary per se, and it leans a little bit more into the slasher genre, and it's a gorgeous blend of comedy, gore, and ideal family values. Next up is Frozen, and not the 2013 Disney classic Frozen, but the Frozen movie that Frozen movie is based on, 2010 psychological thriller Frozen. I feel like I've said Frozen a little too many times now. But that was just a bit of a fib. The two movies have nothing to do with each other, but 2010's Frozen is an impressive psychological horror thriller that does a lot with a little. It's a single location film, and it's about 3 friends who get trapped on a ski lift as an oncoming snowstorm is about to pummel the area. It starts off as an enjoyable young college kids going on a ski trip and just having a good old time type of movie. So we're definitely having a good time up until they get stuck up on that ski lift, which it makes the absolute shift in tone all the more jarring. 3 leads that get stuck are 2 dudes who are longtime friends and then one of their girlfriend. The acting is totally believable, which isn't a surprise coming from Shawn Ashmore, Emma Bell, and Kevin Zegers, I think is how you say his last name. Also, just think of all the things that could go wrong being stranded in the winter wilderness 50 feet above a ski slope with a snowstorm on the way, and those things probably happen in this movie. I was surprised to read that the film was shot entirely practically, so no green screen or CGI, which while watching, I kept asking myself, is this green screen? But apparently not, adding to the impressiveness of this flick. Frozen also has a cameo from Kane Hodder, who is famously known for his cameos in horror movies and playing Jason Voorhees, and this duo with him and the director actually makes another appearance on this list in just a few minutes. The Belko Experiment is an action horror flick where workers are trapped in their high-rise corporate office and ordered by an unknown voice coming from the intercom system to either start killing their coworkers or be killed. This one is directed by Greg McLean, who also directed Wolf Creek 1 and 2 and Rogue, and it's written by James Gunn, surprisingly, who has written and directed some of our favorite movies like the Guardian of the Galaxy franchise, Slither, and Dawn of the Dead. The Belko Experiment doesn't break new ground or reinvent the wheel, but it also doesn't give off the impression that it was trying to, And sometimes you just want some good old bloody and entertaining horror, and that's exactly what you get with this one. If you've seen the horror movie Mayhem with Steven Yeun, it is very similar to that in tone and execution, and you'll see a lot of great recognizable actors make appearances throughout the film. Old school American horror. That's the tagline of the first Hatchet movie, and that's exactly what you get here. Just a good old-fashioned slasher filled with brutal, gory kills, dumb young adults, and a horror icon named Victor Crowley, played by Kane Hodder. The Hatchet series is directed by Adam Green, who directed Frozen, which we already talked about, and Hatchet is wildly different than Frozen. When a group of tourists in a New Orleans haunted swamp tour find themselves stranded in the wilderness, their evening of fun and spooks just turns into a horrific nightmare. Enter Victor Crowley, a disfigured, vengeful, swamp-dwelling maniac with a rusted hatchet and an insatiable bloodlust. According to local legend, Crowley was horribly burned and left for dead as a child. Now he hunts anyone who dares step foot in his territory, tearing them apart in some of the most creative and gruesome kills in modern slasher history. Adam Green, the director, had a no CGI rule implemented for post-production, so this is a practical effects extravaganza which will impress you after you've seen some of these kills. Hatchet is perfect for all slasher lovers, and although it's nearly 20 years old now, I still see it overlooked when people talk about great slasher movies. Do you think you could stay awake for over 100 hours? That is what this group of 6 young adults are forced to do during a clinical trial gone wrong in this Irish horror film, Double Blind. The clinical trial starts pretty typically. The subjects are just holed up in this facility and given drugs and basic instructions. However, very quickly, some unexpected side effects appear, and the participants are forced to try and stay awake until they can either be saved, find a cure, or escape. For context, in case you don't know, a double-blind study is when neither the subjects nor the doctors know who is getting an actual drug in a trial and who is getting a placebo. And all I'll say is it doesn't seem like that definition is super important to the plot. As you can expect, this lack of sleep brings paranoia, hallucinations, and miscalculated decisions. Not only are the characters paranoid, but we as the viewer are as well, as we don't know who to trust, and we're also trying to piece everything together to figure out what is going on. They try various techniques to try to keep each other awake. For me in college, the threat of getting a penis drawn on your face was enough to keep you awake nearly all night, but the stakes are maybe a little bit higher in this one. Millie Brady plays our main character, Claire. It looks like her biggest role in her career so far has been in the TV show The Last Kingdom, but she fits into the horror genre nicely. She's an extremely believable young adult, desperate for a new beginning, dealing with her past traumas. As the movie progresses and each character slowly loses their mind, the filmmakers take more and more creative risks with the cinematography, projecting this trippy, surreal world on the viewers. It kind of reminded me of Under the Skin sometimes with its imagery. Although I loved the way the movie was shot, I think that they could have taken even more risks if they wanted to. There's a bit of blood in the movie, but not a whole lot of gore. It's not over the top in that sense at all, and most of the scariness or dread would come from the psychological hell that these characters are put through, and the atmosphere that the movie creates. The music and sound design do a fantastic job of building that atmosphere, and it's a huge component that keeps you hooked the entire time. The biggest theme that I grasped from this is the concept of taking advantage of poor, homeless, desperate young people who don't know any better. There are at least a couple of deaths that are out of the box or unexpected, which are worth the watch in and of themselves. My least favorite thing about this movie is how little info there is online about it. Hardly any trivia or BTS. Once the credits rolled, I just wanted to keep exploring the mind and world of the filmmakers. I can't wait to see what the director, Ian Hunt Duffy, does next. You'll see this listed as a 2023 film and a 2024 film. It had a festival run back in 2023, but didn't get a theatrical release until February of 2024. Double Blind has gotten mostly positive feedback from both critics and audiences, so this is an absolute no-brainer to add to your watch list tonight. You might also hear Incident in a Ghostland referred to as just Ghostland, but when you're looking for it on streaming, it will be titled Incident in a Ghostland. It's an underrated psychological horror gem that came out in 2018, and it's directed by Pascal Laugier. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, but he's the guy who directed Martyrs and The Tall Man. Now, the movie is disturbing in its own right, but not nearly on the same level as Martyrs, but there are similar themes and situations now that I think about it. I don't really remember The Tall Man. Is that the one with Jessica Biel? I think it is the one with Jessica Biel. I know I have watched it, but I have no memory of it. Was it good? Maybe that's the answer to my question if I don't remember it. A mother of two who inherits a house is confronted with murderous intruders on the first night in their new house and fights for her daughter's lives. 16 years later, when the daughters reunite at the house, things get really strange. This movie is absolutely thrilling and disturbing. There's a few good jump scares in there, all pretty predictable. But it starts off as a very straightforward popcorn flick, but the movie takes some turns that really pull you into the story, and you'll find yourself glued to the screen. If you decide to watch Ghostland, you'll explore themes of psychological trauma and paranoia, coping with loss, and I feel like this needs a trigger warning as well for sexual violence involving teenage children. A haunting behind-the-scenes piece of trivia is that on the last day of shooting, one of the main actresses experienced facial disfigurement after she crashed through a glass door. That's fucking gnarly. She subsequently sued the production company, understandably, and the case was settled out of court. Director duo Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead brought us The Endless back in 2017, and it's a fantastic sci-fi cosmic horror movie. As is common in their films, Benson and Moorhead also star as our main characters, these two brothers. Now, as kids, they escaped a UFO death cult, and now they're seeking answers after an old videotape surfaces and brings them back to where they began. As they revisit this cult that they escaped, things just seem kind of off and they can't really put their finger on why. Straight up, I'll say this movie leaves you with a lot of questions and will require a rewatch to really catch everything and put the pieces together. It's just a mindfuck. You've got like time warping, this cult mystery going on, and it just turns into cosmic horror juiciness by the end. If you're a fan of Benson and Moorhead's other work like Spring, Synchronic, Resolution, or There's Something in the Dirt, this one is a must-watch. The Endless is an indie flick and definitely feels like it, so if you don't like low-budget indie movies, skip this one, but if you don't mind that, it's definitely worth a watch. Vampire movies are usually fast, feral, and filled with blood-soaked action, but Let the Right One In takes a very different approach, one that's haunting, emotional, and deeply unsettling. In this Swedish horror film, we follow Oscar, a lonely, bullied 12-year-old boy who spends his days dreaming of revenge against his tormentors. One night he meets Ely, a mysterious girl who only comes out at night, doesn't seem to feel the cold, and has a dark secret. You guessed it, she's a vampire. We watch how Oscar and Ely's relationship develops over time in the form of a chilling, slow burn winterscape. Though it has that slow burn feel to it, and the runtime is nearly 2 hours, the film absolutely earns both of those characteristics. It really takes the time to flesh out its characters so that we get to know them and care about them. And we slowly learn exactly what Ely is and what that means in this world. And Let the Right One In just delivers a quiet, poetic horror story filled with tragic beauty, eerie suspense, and moments of shocking brutality. Some people think that there's a lot of heart behind the movie and that it's adorable or sweet, but it's actually quite the opposite when you think about what Ely really is. The cinematography does a masterful job of painting a picture of loneliness and isolation, and the performances of the two child actors here in the film are fantastic as well. The movie could have easily fallen apart without these two aspects, but they absolutely nail it. This is a perfect viewing for the wintertime, and yes, there is an American remake called Let Me In, but it's not nearly as good as the original. I put off watching Butterfly Kisses for far too long, and it blew my mind. It's a found footage movie about a found footage movie. Let me explain. So Gavin is an ambitious filmmaker who discovers some old videotapes that were recorded 10 years previously by two film students. They were doing like an expose on a local urban legend called Peeping Tom. Now, who's Peeping Tom? The urban legend is that you go to this certain tunnel in their town and stare down the tunnel for an hour without blinking, and Peeping Tom reveals himself to you. But then every time you blink, he gets closer and closer, ultimately getting so close that he scares you to death. Now, that premise alone should sell the movie, but there's so much more to it, and there's a cameo from the director of Blair Witch Project in this one as well. Part of Butterfly Kiss's genius is the fact that it's analyzing found footage films while also being a found footage film, so it's very meta and also deconstructs the subgenre. This is a slow burn as we are slowly fed bits and pieces of the story in the form of those original tapes, and things slowly start to click. It's very much a thriller in that aspect, but there are like a handful of scenes that really carve in that horror aspect too. If you like this movie, check out my full review of it where I go way more in depth into this movie in my review that I'll link up here. Bound. This is for the folks who are looking for something really fucked up, and don't worry, I'm not going to judge you if that's what you're seeking. So Marty is a shy 5th grader who finds out that his brother is a serial killer. The opening line of the film is, "My brother keeps a human head in his closet," and it just sets the stage for the film perfectly. Now, stay with this one. The acting in the beginning has a high chance of turning you off, but I have a feeling that if you're seeking a movie like this, you're not looking for Oscar-worthy performances. It's very much worth sitting through the acting. So Marty is also obsessed with horror movies and graphic novels, and he doesn't want to tell anyone about this head that he found for fear of what his brother might do. And I think it's pretty obvious that he also has this like morbid curiosity as well, which I think is a common trait among dedicated horror fans like you and me. While the movie is disturbing and there are some intense scenes, I also think that the way people talk about this movie online overhypes it a bit, as far as the gore goes anyway. So a lot of the unease and dread from this movie doesn't come from constant stomach-churning kills, but rather the context in which things are happening. So there are 2 scenes in the movie that I can think of being really disturbing, and one of them is really just implied violence rather than something we actually see on screen. At its core, you could look at Found as a coming-of-age story, I guess, but don't let that overshadow the disturbing and brutal nature of the film. Deathgasm is a New Zealand comedy horror, and it's great for metalheads. This might be the most metal horror movie I've ever seen, and as a guitar player myself, I loved seeing a horror movie centered around a metal band. So Brody moves to a new town to live with his uncle after his dad dies and his mom is institutionalized, and he's just this sort of outcast because of his metalhead lifestyle. He befriends a few other outcasts and they form a band together and call it Deathgasm, all uppercase because lowercase is for pussies. The band acquires an ancient piece of sheet music, which is how they accidentally summon this evil entity. The movie is very bloody and has some gnarly kills, as any metal horror movie should. There's a subtle rickroll, which is hilarious, and there are plenty of references to bands like Brain Drill and Cannibal Corpse. Deathgasm is a damn good time and deserves way more love. The best time to see this movie would have been when it got a theatrical release like 10 years ago, and the next best time is right now. These reviews put it perfectly and should be the final sell for you to watch the movie. This one says, hilarious splatfest for gorehounds with a very twisted sense of humor. This reviewer says, Metalocalypse meets Dead Alive / Brain Dead. And lastly, the most fun I've had since Dead Snow 2. Go watch it. Inside will absolutely traumatize you, and it's on par with Found as the most disturbing movies on this list. We're heading over to France to talk about this insane horror flick from 2007. 4 months after the death of her husband, a woman on the brink of motherhood is tormented in her home by a strange woman who wants her unborn baby. Tormented is a bit of an understatement, honestly. Our pregnant main character Sarah goes through possibly the most brutal night any character has ever gone through in a horror movie. This weird creepy lady goes to great lengths to try and get Sarah's baby, and Sarah must fight for survival to protect herself and the child. She's due to give birth like the very next morning. Now for this one, you do have to suspend disbelief with some of the events that happen in this movie, but that's part of watching a movie, particularly horror, right? Sometimes you just gotta accept the rules and let these things happen on screen without being nitpicky all the time. So trigger warning for lots of brutal, gory stuff happening around a woman being pregnant. I think that's as clear a trigger warning as I can give. Inside is also going to scratch the home invasion itch if you're in the mood for that type of movie as well. Just fair warning, it is relentless, it has shocking violence, and once it gets going, it doesn't really let up. This flick got the Martyrs treatment by getting an American remake, which I haven't seen that one yet, but I'm sure it's not nearly as brutal, so maybe if the storyline sounds interesting to you but you don't think you could stomach the original French film, watch the American remake instead. It was a straight-to-digital release back in 2016, and that one can be found on Prime Video. You really can't go wrong by adding any of these amazing horror movies to your watch list tonight. It'll be the cheapest movie night you've had in years. Thanks for hanging out here on the Nonstop Horror YouTube channel. My name is Cameron, and you can support the channel by liking, subscribing, and signing up for a membership all down below. If you thought today's recommendations were great, I have another Tubi video with like 20 more recommendations, so go check that video out over here as well. Or YouTube thinks that you'll enjoy the video I cooked up down there. I'll see you in the next one, and remember to embrace the fear all year long.